In this chapter, in addition to talking in the United States, we're going to talk a little bit about the executive branch in the California political system. There aren't a lot of points that I want to make, but there are enough that I think it's worth having a separate mini lecture on this. And so what we start with is the main point is that in California, unlike in the United States, in California, we elect a lot more offices that are part of the executive branch than at the federal level. At the federal level, the only office we vote for in the executive branch is the President of the United States. The President comes along with the President of the United States. The President, as a candidate, gets to decide who to vote for is for the President of the United States. The rest of the executive branch is selected by the President and then leave the U.S. Senate. So it's part of the system of checks and balances. So there is some oversight over the choices that the president makes of who's going to serve in the cabinet and the head of each of the departments within the executive branch at the national level. But at the state level, it's very different. In California, there are a number of offices that are elected people. It was put in by the progressives, who were also the ones who wanted to have direct democracy, who wanted to have initiatives, referendums, and recall. And they wanted the idea of having we the people vote on more offices in the executive branch so we could hold them accountable. Again, the idea of elections is really straightforward, that a bunch of candidates run for office. We listen to the ideas of those candidates, and then we vote on the ones we think are the best. The plurality of the votes for the person who gets the most votes in that election is then selected for that office. They're in office for a period of time, for 4 years, and then if they do a great job, then we can reelect them, and if not, we choose someone else. So that's the idea behind having elected positions within the executive branch at the state level. And so in California, it's listed on that slide, are elected the governor, the lieutenant governor, the secretary of state, the attorney general, the treasurer, the comptroller, the insurance commissioner, and the superintendent of public instruction, all of which are part of the executive branch and work with the governor to implement policies in all sorts of different areas. There is a democratic accountability because we, the voters, have some say over those individuals that when they run for re-election, that they need to be somehow making choices that will allow them to get re-elected. So the other thing to note in California federal level is that the executive branch at the state level is completely dominated by Democrats, just as the legislature in California is dominated by Democrats. One of the plural executive is held by Democrats. They're elected positions, and the plurality of voters in all of those different elections, Democrats. So moving on to the next slide, we have the effects of this plural executive. And there are effects to it. One is that you can develop some expertise by having individuals who run for these positions and they lay out their policy vision for the specific area in which they're going. The Attorney General stands as the head legal officer for the state of California. You have that the comptroller is dealing with, as the treasurer is going to do. The superintendent of public instruction obviously deals with public instruction, with public education. And so the hope is that by having individuals who choose to run for those offices, that they're doing so because they have a vision, a specific idea of what they want to put into place for the 4 years, or if they're reelected, the 8 years. And so it makes sense, particularly for things like the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, and the Treasurer, where they're fairly specialized jobs that are important to it. The other thing is that it creates some on-the-job training for politicians, that it allows them to become experts in those areas. And as they go forward, if they run for further office, potentially running for senator of the state, or maybe moving to a different part of the executive branch as lieutenant governor or governor, then maybe they'll have that expertise and can include that expertise when they move on to other elected positions. Or if they're not elected, they can still use that expertise when they go into private practice and whatever they decide to do. But there are also some potentially negative events to the effects of this, and that is that many believe that it's really just set as a to move on to as they wait for another position to open up. And so some people are concerned that the person who's running for insurance isn't someone who has had any expertise in the idea of insurance, but instead wants to be in the public eye, wants to have elected office as they're waiting for perhaps the Senate seat to open up, or to be their time to run for the governor of the state. they will go back and finish up in the state senate or the state assembly. And so in many ways, it's a concern that this is really simply a placeholder for politicians, as opposed to what the idea behind the plural executive is to have people who gain this expertise and can use that expertise to develop policies for a complicated state. So once again, we see that there are some potentially positive effects to it, but in some ways we can also criticize what happens.